I think we'll just jump in already because soon it's almost Hanukkah, so we might as well start right now. And I'll start off with L'chaim. It's not an exciting L'chaim, but it's some coffee. At this hour, it works for me. I'll begin by, first of all, welcoming everybody to join. And of course, I want to say a special thank you to Reb Reuven, who continues to encourage us to get together and learn. When I say us, I don't mean just me and him. I mean all of us on here and those who are even not on here. The idea of learning Torah, as we know, is really connecting ourselves to the highest levels possible, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which feeds into this class. So studying Torah connects us to the wisdom of God. Doing mitzvahs connects us to the will of God. Those are basically two prongs that we have in terms of connecting and elevating. So that's why it says Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. So Yeshikayach Reb Reuven for once again, I believe our second class. Hopefully, many more to come. And we decided, even though initially it was going to be a Parshat class, since tomorrow night's Hanukkah, we reserve the right. We spoke to the board. We have the flexibility amongst the spiritual, guidance to switch when we need to. And sure enough, right now we have Hanukkah, so like less than 24 hours. So I think it's a great topic, and the format will be similar to last time, where we each address a different topic, and we'll both weigh in on that. And hopefully afterwards, everybody can stick around and open up for questions across the board. So the topic that I'm going to dedicate myself is more about the light, the menorah specifically. This symbolic expression of this Yom Tov, of this Hanukkah. And Reb Reuven is going to talk more about the liturgy in terms of the Al Hanisim, perhaps on Eretz Halalu, and looking forward to hearing that as well. So let's jump right in. Everybody knows that the storyline of every Jewish holiday is the same, right? You all heard this one before. There was a bunch, the Jews were fine, they were minding their own business, came the anti-Semites, started making them crazy, and they wanted to start to kill them. Then God created a miracle, and they were saved, let's eat, right? That's the way every holiday, Purim, Pesach, Hanukkah, you name it, that's the story of our people. Here it goes. But while that is true, and there's no denying that one, we know that there's certainly a lot more to it. And every holiday has a unique expression, a unique energy that we are gifted, and that's why we are given this specific holiday, and that's why we address this holiday every year again and again. So for example, Pesach, Passover, is the idea of freedom. It's not just a physical idea that we left Egypt so commemorate that 3,000 years ago that Pharaoh let us go, but no, that we have the freedom today to express ourselves any way we want. We are free. We can never be a slave again. I'll share a story later about that. In other words, it can be tied down, but our will and wisdom and how we think and how we want to elevate our mind and our soul, no one can take from us, no matter what. Sukkot represents the idea of unity, the idea of being embraced, the idea of being sheltered. And on Purim is already representing the idea of our uniqueness as a people. Haman didn't like the fact that we were still doing our own thing, even though we were spread out. So to maintain this uniqueness, we have Purim, and that's celebrated by being kind to each other and different mitzvos that we institute. Comes Hanukkah, it's very, very different. Because also, the main miracle of Hanukkah, the fact that we're all here today on a Zoom call, is the fact that the Chashmonaim, the brave fighters, were able to be the few against the many and the weak against the mighty. And ultimately, they were able to defeat the Greeks, and ultimately here we are. And yet that's not when we celebrate the holiday. We don't commemorate at that time. It's commemorated sometime after that. I don't know if it's a week, maybe a few more days, until they go back into the temple, and they want to reestablish and thank God for being alive. And they look for the jug of oil, and you all know the story, and they can only find a jug of oil that is signed by the seal, that's holy in perfection, that can only last for 1 day and last for 8 days. And after that, then they establish this is Hanukkah, let's celebrate Hanukkah. So there's a couple questions. Why wait for the second seeming ancillary miracle? I mean, let's think about this for a second. In your own mind, and you don't have to answer this out loud, but what's a greater miracle? That one candle should last for 8 days, or a jug of oil that should have lasted 1 day lasts for 8 days, or all the Jewish people are saved? Like, which one's more important to you? I know which one's more important to me. If you went to Vegas, this is before COVID, I'm sure David Copperfield can figure out how to make one candle that lasts for 1 day should last for 8 days. It could be a neat magic trick, or maybe deeper than that. But compared to the other one, so yet why do we wait for this to establish it? And what's, of course, to learn from that? And you can go further deeper into think about the menorah. In other words, today it's established the menorah is the symbol of Hanukkah. The same way matzah is the symbol of Passover, and shofar is the symbol of Rosh Hashanah, and Hamantash and Megillah is the symbol of Purim. So maybe we should have had a shield or a sword. I don't think politically correctness was the reason why we didn't have that. Obviously, it has to be more reason than that. And it's so much so the menorah that even on the U.S. stamp today, you have menorahs, and you have menorahs everywhere. And it's socially acceptable. And even on Walgreens and CVS, where 98% of maybe not in Brookline, but 98% of the people, not necessarily in the world, in the United States, are not Jewish, but there's menorahs on the outside, and everyone seems to embrace this idea of the menorah and what it's about. So how did this come to be and why? Well, this is such a great question that it was asked over 2,000 years ago in the Talmud, in Masechta Shabbat 21b. They said, "My Hanukkah." They opened up, what's the question? Is why do we have Hanukkah? And when they answer this, they take a good 7, 8, 9, 10 lines, and all it talks about is the Jews came into the temple, they looked for the oil, they found one jug, it was supposed to last for 1 day, lasted for 8 days. Doesn't mention a word about the military victory, which is seemingly, as we discussed, should be the main one. So again, we need to find out what is this about this menorah and this light that seems to surpass what seems to be on the face, much more obvious miracle, the existence of our lives. Furthermore, as I'm sure we're going to get to hear soon from Reb Reuven in terms of the Al Hanisim, there's almost a switch. Once we come to the liturgy and we talk about in our Shemona Esrei or in our benching, it doesn't really mention much about the light anymore. Now we go against, well, now we're specifically talking about this physical victory that we have, the few against the many, the weak against the mighty. And so in the Gemara, when it talks about the miracle, it doesn't mention the military victory. When we talk about the military victory, we don't talk too much about the oil. We seem to want to separate this physical and spiritual dynamic that takes place in this one holiday. Why? Why? So to begin to understand this answer, we have to appreciate a little bit of the challenge that took place at the time of the Greeks and why this joke that I made about every holiday being similar, where there's anti-Semites that want to kill us, God saves. What's different about Hanukkah? Very, very strange, actually, when you think about it. In most holidays that we know of, and most miracles that we know of, usually it's a classic case of anti-Semitism. They didn't like the Jews. No one can explain why they don't like the Jews. Of course, it's irrational, as we know. It's a deep-rooted hate. And they don't understand. They haven't got to know their neighbor. And that's it. That's where it is. They hate the Jews. It's not the first time. So ultimately, when we talk about Hanukkah, what makes it different is the Greeks actually didn't hate the Jews. They were very happy to be friendly neighbors. They welcomed and embraced their culture and didn't mind them actually practicing their culture. They had one problem. God. That's it. The 3-letter word. If it wasn't for God, they'd be perfectly fine with the Jewish tradition and culture. What is it about this godliness that the Jews have to also attach in their experience? It was the fact that it was their Torah or chukim, the type of mitzvahs that require beyond rationale, bris milah, certain sort of mitzvahs that we have that's beyond rationale. This they couldn't wrap their hand around. They can accept bagels, lox, and cream cheese, no problem. But the idea that there should be, that you actually believe in something, that there's actually a connection from every mitzvah that you do, that you connect yourself to a deity higher, that they didn't like. That they couldn't understand because they're rationalists and they couldn't. And so that was the beginning of trying to impede their Hellenistic ways within the Jewish people, to chip away slowly but surely and assimilate, and try to assimilate them. And that was divided. And we know many people sadly did go ahead and cross over. And so this is different than Purim. Haman was a classical anti-Semite. He just wanted to kill Jews, like most of the times that we're dealing with. Pharaoh had maybe other reasons. He wanted to have cheap labor. Over here was an ideological, spiritual fight, a very serious divide between these two different cultures. And for this, they went to fight, they went to war. And perhaps now we can understand a little bit the symbol of the light. of why the menorah ultimately becomes the one symbol of the holiday that eclipses even the latkes. It's enjoyable, it's a custom, it's not a mitzvah. But what is it about light? So let's talk about light for a second. There's something unique about light. Light is the most spiritual thing that we have in this world, but it's still physical. It's light. You can see light. If you're in a room, let's not do this right now, and you shut the light, you can't see each other. You put on the light, you see each other. So obviously it's a physical component to the light, but you can't grab light and put it in your pocket. It doesn't quite work that way. So light has this duality of having this physical and spiritual experience. As a matter of fact, the Kabbalists refer to God as the Or Ein Sof, the endless light. So light in Torah is very, very prominent, is very, very big. There's also something called Ner. This is a very important one, classic verse from Mishle, and it's brought about often in Hasidic terminology. It's Ner Havaya Nishmat Adam. When we refer to our own personal soul, we refer to it as the light. It's a part of the greater light. God is the Or Ein Sof, the endless light, and we carry a piece of that light inside of us, otherwise known as a neshama, a soul. And so it says, Ner Havaya Nishmat Adam. The candle of God is the soul of man. What does that mean? That means as we express and as we identify and we share our own light, our own soul, this, so to speak, gives light to God. He can see the world in a greater perspective, and we have influence in that, and we have the ability to do that. By the way, the common expression of that is Tikkun Olam B'Malchut Shaddai. But most people think of that as only in terms of cultural or experiential or maybe environmental. But Tikkun Olam is to really heal the world, and how? B'Malchut Shaddai, with the glory of Hashem. And each person can do that starting from themselves, and has to start from themselves. You don't start from somebody else. You start from yourself. And understanding this idea of light, and this was the real war, this was the real rub in terms of what is the fight, what is the challenges. Can we maintain this light that connects us to something higher? Well, the Greeks had an issue with that. And the Jews obviously wanted to somehow maintain that. They weren't ready to give that up. It could have been very easy. They could have lived a better life. They wouldn't have fought. They wouldn't have lost lives, but they couldn't. And so therefore, even after the military victory that they were saved, what they do, they ran to the temple to go ahead and find light and light the menorah. And because they were committed and they were stubborn, stiff-necked people, to find the oil, and they only found one oil, which is what we call Nes B'Teva, Nes Melubish B'Teva. Perhaps there's another class devoted to this, but the idea that there's a miracle enclosed in nature. In other words, is it a miracle that they found the jug of oil? Maybe, but it's a miracle that could happen. But that the oil should last for 1 day, can last for 8 days, that's a miracle that's beyond nature. So we have this commitment to go back into the temple and find the oil and light the oil. And because of this sort of inner calling to find the oil and light the oil, we are blessed to go ahead and see this oil and light extend itself even beyond what would be the rational expression of that time, or the amount of oil. And perhaps now this also explains a little bit more, I'll speak for myself, the obsession with Chabad and lighting menorahs. I mean, we have an obsession with every kind of mitzvah, tefillin and this, that, but with the menorah, it's really a big deal. And as a matter of fact, I just got my menorah out of my garage. It's going to go in my car tomorrow. If you see it, you can honk and wave. And menorah, we know that in the Gemara talks about, when do you light the menorah? When it gets dark. And where do we light the menorah? By the window, to give light to the outside. And this is truly symbolic of all of parts of Judaism, but the menorah has its highest expression. You know, Shabbos candles, of course, is a beautiful light, but that's more dedicated for internal, for our own home. We light Shabbos candles for Shalom Bayit. The focus of Shabbos candles is more inside the house. The focus of the menorah light is really for outside, is to bring godliness into the world, starting from ourselves. In other words, it has to be from your house. You can't have just a menorah completely outside. It starts from within and to shine outside. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So this idea that really we must start first from ourselves to find our own light. And once we're able to establish that, then we can really, really fan that out and go into the outside light and to go give it out. Now, I want to share a couple quick anecdotal stories, and then we'll go with the conclusion about this light that we're talking about. Some 2,000 years later, that exists in 2020. The light that still exists within our own hearts and souls, and the light that exists within our families. So I had a debate with one of the young adults that come here in terms of this idea of the soul and its existence and its light, and the need to find it and the need to fan it. And I told him about a story that I heard from an event called Burning Man. I don't know if you guys have heard of this Burning Man. Burning Man it's a wild party. It takes place in Nevada somewhere, completely desert area. There's, I don't know, 100,000 people, a couple 100,000 people. And it's out there. It's, off the grid, both in terms of its literal sense and its, experiential sense. Okay. And everyone goes there to express themselves any way they want. And there's a lot of art there and other mishigas, and everything goes, as they say. Think of it like a Woodstock, on steroids, okay? Now, one thing takes place. It's 7 days. On Friday night, I found out, I wasn't there, it was on my bucket list, which I may or may not make it to, but on Friday night, there was a tent there, and there was a Friday night Shabbat service and dinner in Burning Man, Nevada. Now let's understand this. This wasn't a Hasidic group from New York that went to Burning Man. The people who went to Burning Man, our brothers and sisters who were there, were obviously seekers, searchers, artists, interesting people, but not religious. And 700 came together on a Friday night. To what? To experience Shabbos, to experience godliness. Now think about that. The whole Burning Man is a counterculture experience. It's a counterculture revolution. What is the greatest counterculture to counterculture? Expressing your own light, sharing your own light. This is what took place in Burning Man. 700 people felt the need. Now, just to double check this, I was curious that maybe other religions also do this. No, there's no Sunday service for the Islamic renegades, rebels that are in Burning Man. And there's no Friday one for Islamic, and there's no Sunday for the Christian, lapsed Christians that also want to have some sort of experience in their own culture and tradition. But to the Jew, they cannot get rid of their own light. And they have to, once again, fight for it. They have to, even at the end of the destruction or the war of the Greeks, they still feel compelled to look for another jug of oil. Think about it. They could have easily have said, let's wait till next year. We just finished a war. We lost people. We lost righteous people in this war. Let's clean up the mess. Let's get back together. Let's regroup. And next year, no, they found it within themselves, within their own light, so to speak, to look for more light. This is the miracle of Hanukkah. This is why we celebrate it. This is why we specifically celebrate it with menorah. This is why we use the most physical / spiritual expression, unlike matzah or potato, or other hamantashen that symbolizes Hanukkah. And then we'll conclude, as I promised, that this also answers the question of why we don't have the story within the Gemara, why it doesn't mention the military victory, and why in the Al-Hanisim it doesn't mention the oil. Because if we're going to mention the oil in the Al-Hanisim compared to the military victory, it would be almost shadowed by this power of the victory or the miracle of the oil, reflective and representative of our own desire to go ahead and connect. So that's why I said that it's not put in there. That obviously, they're both important, they're both critical, but next to each other, we may lose the importance, and that's why it left it out in order to highlight the military victory, because that's important too. So let us conclude, as we're less than 24 hours to Hanukkah, that may this Hanukkah be a time that we all find within ourselves the light, not be scared to fan it, not be scared to express it, not be scared to share it. And once we figure out how to do it for ourselves, and even if you don't do it perfectly for yourselves, as long as you do it a little bit enough for yourself, you can still start to share it with others. This is a tough act in terms of having a spiritual expression overshadow our physical experience. And maybe only the righteous tzaddikim, when they walk down the street, you see a spiritual entity walking as opposed to a physical. But at least for a moment, allow yourself to stare at the Hanukkah lights tomorrow night and allow that consciousness of the light, the spiritual experience of light, overshadow the own physical experience. And perhaps we'll have a taste of it, an ideal to look forward to and to look up to, that ultimately will resonate through us, not just throughout Hanukkah, but throughout the rest of the year. So I'll conclude wishing everybody a happy and enlightening Hanukkah. Okay. L'chaim.